And kia ora, good morning and welcome to something a bit special on Morning Report this morning, our finance debate with the leaders of their finance portfolio for both the major parties. Not quite the leaders yet, unless something's changed. A lot of leadership things have changed this election, guys.
Definitely not.
Those voices, if you're listening only on radio, are Grant Robertson from Labour and Stephen Joyce from National. But this is also being streamed this morning on Facebook, on YouTube and on Freeview Channel 50. So take a look as well as a listen this morning. And good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Morning, guys.
Now, we are going to talk this morning about the issue which has divided you two guys pretty seriously, which is over the fiscal. So we will get to the fiscal scrap later, but we're not going to start with a fight this morning. We might have one later, but we'll wait for that. Okay, so we're going to talk about a number of things this morning, about how we generate wealth, about how the integrity of the tax system is maintained, about wages and work, and some of the values and principles and even ideologies that underpin the policies you're putting forward. I want to start with a couple of general questions on the economy, though, and I will start with you, Grant Robertson. Do you agree with this assessment of the economy? Quote, on most measures, certainly international experts would give New Zealand the tick.
Yeah, look, we're a well-performing economy relative to the rest of the world. But when we go down a level from that top level of indicators, what you see is an economy that's actually drifting. We've had GDP per capita go backwards over the last 6 months. We've had productivity completely flat and actually falling a little over the last 4 years. And as a result, New Zealanders are not seeing in their wages the benefit of those high-level indicators that do look good relative to the rest of the world.
It's a nuanced argument, though, isn't it, to sell that the economy's doing pretty well, but we should change it?
No, not really, because I think people in their everyday lives feel it. You know, they hear these statistics about growth rates being 3.5%, but then in their everyday lives, they don't see that. You know, 2/3 of New Zealanders got a pay rise less than the rate of inflation in this year. So they're not feeling the benefits of that. We're seeing too many people miss out. Inequality is growing. So I think New Zealanders actually understand that, yes, compared to some other countries in the world, we're relatively well off, but the benefits of that are not being fairly shared.
Okay, and we will touch on some of those issues and pick up on some of those.
I'll address a couple of those things if I can, because actually I think Grant's right that the New Zealand economy is going well. I think where it all unravels was his use of statistics, actually, because
They're your statistics.
No, the statistics show that actually New Zealand is doing well. We're adding a lot of jobs. And although wages are not growing rapidly because we're in very low inflationary times, they are growing a bit faster than inflation, and they have been for a while.
Well, they're growing at 1.2% in the private sector.
Well,
that's pretty
well, that's
miserable,
right, and
isn't it?
inflation last year was zero. So, and look, nobody's arguing that we're in high inflationary times. In 2008, wages were going up 5%, inflation was 5%, so everybody was standing still, even though their wages were going up. And what we're seeing now is very strong strong employment growth. We're seeing an economy that's performing well, and there's reasons for that. And you asked at the start about how do you generate wealth in an economy? And the way you generate wealth is by backing your businesses. New Zealand's a nation of small businesses. We're not a nation of sort of multinational businesses. We have a few here, but actually mostly it's small businesses. And the way you actually generate wealth, the reason the economy is going well is we're working with those businesses to help them succeed on the world stage. That's what's very important.
Well, let's have a look at how we do generate wealth and how we earn the money for New Zealand. What's the big trade agreement that you've cracked in nearly a decade?
Well, firstly, Korea, obviously. Secondly, making sure that China is working. Thirdly,
you can't claim China.
I can claim China.
You can't, Stephen. You've had one agreement in 9 years that you've got from woe to go. One agreement in 9 years from woe to go.
And that is a fair that's fair, isn't it? And you said it yourself. You've got Korea, but as Grant Robertson says, you know, despite being the big free trading party, you haven't nailed anything like the number of trade agreements.
So firstly, you have to make China work. China was signed literally just before we came into office, and we then went full on working with the Chinese, being open to the investment and the encouragement of Chinese people for the
fair
education.
Enough. Is that your best story on trade then?
That's a very big story on trade, because we've like no, it's not the agreement. It's actually what you do. I'll give you another one. Is the government procurement agreement worldwide with the WTO, which Labor opposed, which all our tech companies are massively in favour with, because actually it gives them access to markets like the US. The Labor Party said we shouldn't do that because it means it's harder for our companies to compete
Well,
in
let's go
government
to one that
procurement.
the Labor Party genuinely says don't do, and that is the TPP, Grant Robertson. Helen Clark said it was a no-brainer. We've still got the TPP 11 as a prospect, and you're saying no. Wow, you don't want a trade agreement with Japan?
That's right.
Look, we want a quality agreement for our exporters around the world with every country that we can get. What we're not prepared to do is trade off New Zealanders' right to pass a law that actually other parties to TPP have passed. So Australia's done this, which is the right to say that somebody who has no intention to live here and no right to live here can't buy an
But
existing
you could do
residential
that
property.
with a land tax.
Right,
Couldn't
so
you?
go with the
Or
land
a
tax.
stamp duty. Or a stamp
No,
duty.
we couldn't achieve exactly what we want to there.
planning
We
on
could
doing
not
that.
achieve the
you
right.
Could drive, you could make it so expensive for a foreigner to buy that was...
But flip the argument around, Guy, and other countries in the same agreement have got what we're asking for. All we're saying is now we've got the opportunity to renegotiate it. Actually, a number of parties want to renegotiate things that the US drove that are no longer part of the agreement. So
Yep, and we'll be
we are
years if
committed
we
to
do that.
trade, and I think the point you were making before is the right one. We've negotiated good quality trade agreements like the China agreement. Labor remains committed to that, but we also remain committed to protecting our right to make the laws in our
Okay, so
interest.
just for clarity's purpose for our listeners, you're saying at the moment no to TPP?
As it stands, yes.
Well, I think there's your big issue because we have an opportunity over the next few months as 11 countries to decide to move together to ratify TPP and get those 11 countries.
So
with
will you
access.
protect our right to
hang
do
on a
that,
second.
Steve?
Let me have a few words, because the reality of it is, if we all decide that we want to bring our negotiating positions back to the table, and there's 11 countries and we're one of the smallest, then actually it'll be years and years and years before we go there again. It's because everybody has things they'd like to change.
Okay, well, quick
and it's a
question,
trade
Grant
agreement.
Robertson,
So
you wanted to
I
come
suppose
in
the question would be, if you go to Vietnam as a government, if we get to go to Vietnam as a government, we'll be saying, come on everybody, we've all got little things we don't like about this agreement, and New Zealand has things we don't like. It's trade agreements, it's how you work. We're going to jump together and make this happen now.
Yeah.
And I suppose
Stephen,
the question for Grant was, if he was in that position, would he say no?
Yeah, no.
Actually, everybody else is saying I do it, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, no, what we would do is negotiate in the best interests of New Zealanders, as we did when we negotiated
that's what you
other
do in all
agreements.
trade
But-
deals.
But Stephen, it's changed. The world's changed. The US is not there anymore. Why not stand up for New Zealanders and get us the same deal that Australia's got?
Because we're standing up for New Zealanders. Every trade deal, and I don't know why you haven't quite picked up on this, but every trade deal involves compromise.
Yeah.
Every trade deal
It
involves
does.
compromise, and New Zealand has already been through a long process with TPP. And every
game's
agreement we
changed.
have.
The
All right,
game's
so,
changed.
So we
so
should
you're
get on
saying
with
no,
it. Let's
and
get
Stephen
access to
Joyce
Japan.
wants to keep going on that.
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
I think we've arrived at a landing on that, as they say. If we look at what's happening on trade in Queensland right now, where they're saying that they would favour local bidders for public contracts by up to 30% against outside bidders. Jacinda Ardern has talked about retaliating against Australia in the tertiary space, where she's saying we would lock your guys out of tertiary here if you do it to us. I mean, would you take a similar approach on something like that?
On the Queensland thing, no. I mean, what I think there is that in New Zealand, the government spends in excess of $40 billion a year buying goods and services, procuring things on our behalf. We need to give New Zealand firms a fair go at that. That doesn't mean taking the Queensland approach. It means doing what other countries that we trade with do, which is say, in the criteria for awarding those contracts, how many jobs will be created in New Zealand? How will we actually make sure that New Zealand firms get a fair slice of that? That doesn't happen at the moment. You go down to my old hometown in Dunedin and see what happened with the hillside workshops. You see what happens when a government lets things drift, takes its hands off the wheel.
Hang on a
Fair
second.
enough.
That's
Stephen
a
Joyce,
very
would you
big
respond to
call
that?
you're saying there, because actually all of New Zealand's high-tech firms, of which there are many, get access into the US market because of a thing called the Global
And the
Procurement
US
Agreement.
has the
Hang on,
kind
no,
of
hang on,
procurement
no.
rules I'm talking about,
Just give me a
Stephen.
second. No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Not for New Zealand companies now. And if you're saying that Fisher and Paykel Healthcare and all these other tech companies would have to effectively go to the US, we've just negotiated that they can do everything from here and have the jobs
And
here.
nothing
and
will
if you,
change with that.
No, you're not, because actually
Nothing will change because the countries
if
we're
you're
doing that with have the same kind of rules I'm talking about,
No,
which
they
is
don't.
actually just
Not
giving
for-
New
not
Zealand
for the
firms a fair go.
Not for
I
the
thought we were
WTO.
going to save
hang
the
on a
scrap
second.
to the end.
No, hang on a second. WTO, government procurement agreements, it allows our tech firms firms to go to countries and requires countries to provide access to
So
our
what are you
tech.
going to do with
all right.
Queensland
And
then, Stephen?
so in terms of...
And I'm going to call time on that because it's probably pretty technical for a lot of people.
yeah,
And
no,
I want to
get
move.
that, but
And I want to move to the.
It's technical for people, but it's not technical for the companies. These companies
And they
actually
still do
survive
it,
on
Stephen.
this
All right.
access.
Okay, I want to move to the tax system, which affects just about every New Zealander, right?
Yep.
Stephen Joyce, you've got tax cuts coming in for April 1. You seem to have committed to another tax package
2020
before
subject.
2020.
I think the math's over.
But we can't cut our way in taxes to prosperity, can we? I mean,
Well,
surely at some point you're going to have to come up with another strand to your theory than cutting taxes.
Well, excuse me, we have, and that's how the New Zealand economy is one of the faster growing economies in the OECD. So you can't just sort of say, oh, that hasn't happened. And the reason we get to do the family incomes package is precisely because of the strength of the economy, because we've all invested in the skills and the infrastructure, in the confidence in investors, all those things.
but how low can taxes go?
Well, actually, let's talk to somebody on a middle income who's at $50,000 a year, $52,000 a year, and they're currently facing a marginal tax rate of 30 cents in the dollar. I'm absolutely confident that they think taxes can be a bit lower for them. Thank you very much.
All right, Grant Robertson.
Well, no, because what
they should be high.
Stephen's package means is that we will not fund health and education properly in New Zealand. Well, that is.
No.
Because, well, here's the challenge for you, Stephen. Will you raise health and education spending by the rate of inflation and for population growth over the next 4 years? Will you do that?
We have been doing that.
No, answer the question.
We have
Will
been
you do
doing
it?
that, and we
Will you do it? Are you going to do it?
Hang on a second. So this is a false choice.
No.
It is a false choice, because if you have a strong and growing economy, we can invest in the public services, invest in the infrastructure, and help family incomes. And that's exactly what we've just done. In Budget 2017, the biggest investment in public services in years, $4 billion into the health
And
sector,
yet
for
still
example.
we have district health boards who are in huge deficit.
No.
We still have parents paying more for the cost of their education. We have early childhood education being cut. Go on.
Now, hang on a second.
Grant Robertson, I want Stephen Joyce to respond to that. You've made a strong point.
How can he be concerned about parents paying for education when he's not going to give them the $1,100 a year that they could actually choose to do a whole lot of things with? How can you be concerned about that? Because actually, on the 1st of April, middle-income families, if you've got two people working on the median wage, they will be each $1,100 a year better off, and they will get to decide, because we trust them to decide, how they allocate their money. And actually, why not? Because actually it's their money, and the government should be taking the least that it can take to provide all those services that Grant points out, which we are.
So we've got a package that gives $400 million to the top 10% of earners.
Do you dispute that?
Yes, I do. I dispute that.
How do you dispute that,
those numbers.
Stephen?
And actually, and what's more, Grant is
Grant
is proposing to take away
No.
across 4 years.
Hang on, go on, let me finish the
across
point I
4
was
years,
making.
a total of $2.4 billion.
Let me
That's
do
what
it.
he's talking about.
We're taking that money and we're saying, listening to New Zealanders and saying, we want a health system that's actually there for us. We cover mental health needs.
agree.
We do that. But you're not funding it, Stephen.
Okay,
You've underfunded
no,
it.
it's not
You've both made your points on where you think that should be. I want to put some specific questions to you, Grant Robertson, because you are talking about a possible number of changes to the tax system. Now, Phil Twyford, August 10, it's a tough ask to sell a CGT, a capital gains tax, from opposition, and then, quote, CGT will be on the table, a land value tax will be on the table, asset and wealth taxes. Now I see, and it's taken you a couple of days, to be fair, to get the land tax on a family home ruled out, but you seem to have ruled that out. Is that right? It won't affect that family home. What is a...
So let's go...
Hang on. What is an asset tax and what is a wealth tax?
Okay, so let's get the order of events right here. So Stephen's government introduced a tax.
Let
me finish. I've just started. I will get to it, but it's important to get the sequence of events right. Stephen's government introduced a tax. If you flipped your property,
and you're going to go to 5 years. I
years.
reckon everyone knows that.
Okay, let's be really clear that that's the policy Labor is taking into this election. What we're then doing is setting up a tax working group, which is exactly what National did when they came in 2008. And the mandate for that group is to get a better balance in our tax system. We want those experts to say to us, how do we do that? At the moment, You and I pay tax on every dollar we earn when we go to work. Someone flipping their third rental property and making a $30,000 profit outside of those 5 years doesn't pay tax.
Okay, what
on
about
it.
someone? What about someone who buys a business and then sells it as for a profit?
Okay.
Would that be taxed under your policy?
This is the point, Guy. We're setting up a working group to give us advice on getting better balance in the tax system. No, it isn't, Stephen. It's just in the same way
you might as well
that
be
when
upfront
you
with
no.
people.
We were upfront with people.
No,
We're telling
yes.
people what we're doing.
Just say
What did
yes
you
or
do
no.
in 2008, Stephen? You set a working group up, ruled out a GST increase, and then did a GST increase.
And
we're
reduced
doing the
income
right
taxes
thing
accordingly.
here by saying to New Zealanders there'll be a better balance.
Well, I just think they need to come clean
We
with New
are.
Zealanders, because actually you've got
Stop
all these
making
people.
up more lies,
No,
Stephen.
no,
You've been lying all week,
hang
and
on.
now you're going to do it again.
I thought we'd agreed that the fight would come at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
Nearly there.
So let's go there, because actually you aren't being upfront with New Zealanders,
We
and they're
are.
rightly
Hang on,
suspicious.
hang on.
So where is the details on your land tax? Where is the
We're
details
not
on your capital
proposing a
gains
land tax.
Where's your
We're not
details on
proposing a
your
capital
gains
If you're a
tax.
farmer right now,
We're not
you're looking
proposing
down the
those
barrel
things.
of a land tax, a capital gains
No,
tax,
they're not.
and it would
You're just
say
making
no
things
then.
up.
Just wait.
Say no then. Just say you won't have one.
With respect, Mr. Robertson, you are proposing a land tax of some sort because
No, we're not.
Phil Twyford,
What he's saying is he's saying
He's-
that the working group are going to consider those things.
Right.
So we're not actually
Because
electing a
what
government
would
if
be
we
the
elect a Labour
point?
Party,
What
we're
would
electing
be
a working group.
What would be the point of setting up an expert group if we weren't prepared to listen to them? The mandate we've given them is leave the family home alone, find a better balance so that hardworking New Zealanders who are paying tax on every dollar they earn can see in the system that people who are making money from property speculation actually pay the right tax.
So hang on.
We've got the bright line test. Let's see if that's enough. That's what we're saying to the working group. Is that enough? And they will come back and advise us. We're being upfront about that. Stephen's government introduced 17 new
rubbish.
taxes,
No, rubbish.
which they didn't tell New Zealanders
That's right.
about.
Can I just ask a question about that?
No,
Because
no, you
if you're
can't.
saying that's your priority, then it would be very easy to rule out a capital gains tax on small businesses. It would be very easy to rule out a land tax on commercial property. It would be very easy to rule all those things out for the farms as well, because you're saying that speculation in property is your concern. So why don't you rule out all these other things rather than worrying all these people?
We've got a massive housing crisis in New Zealand,
But
and
it
you
isn't
can put
the
your
small
head in the
businesses.
sand
No,
and
it's not
ignore
about that.
all of the problems that have happened, or you can choose to do something about them. We've said what our
Well, you're not
policy
saying
is.
what you do.
We've said what the mandate for the working group is, and we will get those experts to
So how do
advise us
small
and make
businesses fit
our
into
decision.
that? How do
Okay,
all our
no.
thousands of small businesses fit into that policy?
Stephen Joyce.
That's a fair
If you look at, I've got a better one.
Okay, sure. Well, of course, you're the interviewer. That's your
right.
job.
Well, at some points in this interview I am. Although you guys are
we
far
just
switching
If you want to go
Yeah,
and get a
so-
coffee going, we'll just carry
that's
on.
right, that's right. Why is it, to pick up on Grant's point, I think that's underlying his policy or his principle on this, why is it that I, as a worker, pay tax on my income, yet if I buy and sell a business, for example, or I buy and sell a farm and make a big profit in some cases, why is it fair that I don't pay tax on that?
Well, don't
What is
forget-
the principle of fairness underlying that?
Well, the principle of fairness is that everybody who owns a business, if they take income out of that business, they pay tax on that the same as everybody else. If they, so that's really important. And the business itself pays tax. It pays tax on the profits that are obtained from the business.
Yeah, but no tax on the capital gain. Why is that fair?
Well, because that's the gain that actually occurs by somebody's work through the
Yeah,
business.
I know,
that's
but the gain that I get from working, I pay tax on it. So why is it fair to
well,
have
actually,
no
it's
tax
actually
on something
well, if you
when
sell
you've earned a lot of money
your
on it?
business, and it's you actually the thing that you get paid for is the future profits on that business, where tax is already deducted.
So why does
So that's
every
the
other
reality of
country?
it.
Why does every other country in the OECD, bar two others and us, have these taxes? Why do they do it?
And that's we're right back to it.
No,
because
but why
actually
don't you
now
answer
Grant
that?
is making
Okay,
the
no,
argument
but I'm
whether he wants to have a capital
asking you a
gains tax
question,
on small
Stephen.
businesses. He just won't tell anybody that he does.
You know, and this is the point, Guy. It is about fairness, and it actually is about looking at the causes of inequality.
So we'll put you down
So
for
the
a capital
causes
gains
of
tax.
inequality are the fact at the moment the biggest driver of inequality in New Zealand is actually to do with housing and the fact we've got the lowest home ownership rates in the world. Why not look at what can be done to correct
We
that
haven't got the
balance and
lowest
create
home.
the
Hang on,
fairness.
Mr.
Yes, we
Joyce.
do, Stephen.
No, we don't.
Yes,
we don't
do.
actually have the
In
lowest
60
at all.
years, we have the lowest
Well,
home
you're
ownership rate
deliberately
that we've had
ignoring,
in
so you're
60
deliberately
years.
ignoring trust properties. Can I ask a question about your capital gains tax? Because on
Stephen,
trust,
don't go here. We've got a working group to look at it.
I think it's fair.
No, it's not.
Well, actually,
we've got a
somebody
working
that's
group
got
to
their
look at
home,
it.
their family home in a trust will be very interested in the answer to this question. So
No,
somebody who's got their family home in a trust, would they be
the
subject
family
to...
home being
I
affected,
think
Stephen. We've ruled out the family home.
I think that's what John
Yes,
Key
we've
asked
ruled
in the
out the
last
family home
debate.
being affected.
What about on the land
No,
tax?
you don't get to do this, Stephen.
Hang on, and both of you,
You're not being clear about your
to do
policy. You're not being clear about your policy,
Nothing is going
Stephen.
to be clear for either of you guys or our listeners if we keep shouting over each other, okay? Now, I want to pick up on an audience question because this is about the audience in the end, and this that we've got two in this section. Kerr Rice says to you, Stephen Joyce, that he's living in Wellington with his wife and 3 kids under 10. He's got a great job and earns well over the medium wage. But we are still renting, he says, and don't see a way to buy a house anytime soon. What can you do for him?
A number of things. Firstly, we want to increase his income. That's really important for him and his family, and the family incomes tax package will help, I'd say significantly, don't know all the details of his life.
But $26 a week.
Well, no, but looking at the family circumstances, it could actually be significantly more than that, depending on, for example, the family tax credits of working for families and also the accommodation supplement. I don't know the details, but I'd say that would be more than that. And then that's in the short term. The second part of it is actually things like KiwiSaver Home Start, where you get to, people take their KiwiSaver out, the government adds a subsidy to that to help them get a deposit together, which is the hardest thing for new home buyers at the moment, is getting the deposit together. And then the third thing I think is really important is to keep interest rates down, because for everybody that owns a house, their mortgage is a big determinant on how much income that they actually have else at other times. And actually, you want to make sure you keep debt down. You don't actually increase debt, and that's something that this government's very focused on.
You've made your point now. This question is about capital gains tax, which come in, and we've had a bit on that, and I will allow you a bit more time to say what you're going to do on housing, okay?
Sure. And
then we're going to move into the fiscals to finish. So this question came in from Martin, and he asks, if I gift a house to my child, do you believe the transaction should attract a capital gains tax? So if we could get an answer to that, and then I'll make you, because I gave Stephen Joyce some time there, about what you would do with the housing market.
And the problem here is we're not campaigning on a capital gains tax. What we're saying is we want a system to be designed that is fair and that makes sure that people who earn income are treated fairly alongside people who flip assets. We're protecting...
Hang on, Mr. Joyce.
We're protecting the family home. So in that case, if it is the family home, we will be protecting it. It's the bottom line. But I do want to talk about what we're going to do on housing, because actually we've got a major housing crisis in New Zealand. And either we can drift along and let that continue and let inequality grow, or we can do something about it. That means building a lot of houses that are affordable homes. We're going to do that. It means cracking down on speculators, which we're starting with the 5-year Bright Line test.
Have you got a target? Like it's about 65% home ownership in New Zealand now, isn't it? It's been dropping. Have you got a target?
We don't have a specific target. We want it to lift. And we want it to lift seriously, because that's at the core of really strong communities. But it does have to be both the supply and demand side. And Stephen is simply prepared to let it drift along.
No,
They've denied the housing crisis for 9 years. They've denied the housing crisis for 9 years. It's got worse and worse. We're not prepared to sit back and do nothing.
A quick right of reply, and then I'm going to move to the books.
reply there, actually, and
a quick right of reply.
Well, actually, he's out there. Grant Robertson is famous for calling everything a crisis for the last 9 years.
So housing's not a crisis?
Has been a crisis. The housing market is all about supply and making sure we're building supply, and we are. We have 100,000 houses being built in this country over the next 3 years. That's twice the size of the need. He's talking about building 100,000 in 10 years.
And
actually,
affordable
the other thing that's really important is to make sure that we have the interest rates down to make sure
we talked about that.
Yeah, it's really, you might say it's the most important thing.
Fine. Let's, as promised, talk about this argument over whose plan stacks up and why. Have you, Stephen Joyce, found one other person in New Zealand who believes there is an $11.7 billion hole?
Yes.
Who?
Lots of people.
Who? Name one.
Well, people I talk to all the time.
I just want one name.
Well,
you can be a cab driver if you like. I just want one name.
Well, the simple fact of the matter is...
I want one name.
No, the simple fact of the matter is...
Just one name. One person.
Well, Guyon, I'm not going to reveal people that I've had conversations with without asking.
There's 4.8 million people in New Zealand or whatever. I want one person who agrees with you that there is an $11.7 billion hole. Just one name.
If you do their allowances the way that everybody else does their allowances, it's an $11.7 billion hole. They're now saying that they won't do it that way. They're saying they'll run zero budgets, which is entirely unbelievable.
Give me one name?
And as a result of that, there's a bunch of people who say, well, it could be made to add up. It could be made to add up if they have zero budgets. And that's what's happening on.
Can I ask the question again?
No, you can ask the question all you like.
Can you give me one name of a person who agrees with you? It can be Bill English if you like.
There are literally millions of people. Well, obviously Bill English and the National Party. No, well, there's less. But there's literally millions of people in New Zealand that are concerned about the increased debt that would come under the Labor Party. So, for example, they've already acknowledged their own position that they would increase debt by $8 billion right now over the next 4 years. That's their position. And then you look at their numbers, and their numbers don't add up. So all the economists that have been running around saying it might not be $11.7 billion are also saying that the actual budget that Labor have put on the table is entirely unachievable.
Okay, Grant Robertson, because we're running very short of time.
So Stephen made a very specific allegation this week, which was a lie. No. Not one person in New Zealand has backed that up. No. And Stephen, this is a disgrace.
No, it's
you
not.
Have damaged democracy by what you've done. This is fake news. No, because you made an accusation you know it's not to be true, that no other person has backed up. No. You've questioned my competence. It is a disgrace.
Right.
Do you know what New Zealanders have learned this week, Guyon? They can't trust the Minister of Finance to tell the truth. It is a disgraceful situation, Stephen, and you know it, and you owe New Zealanders an apology.
Grant, you're overreacting.
I'm not, because you threw this on the table. You threw this on the table to try to get the reaction that you got. You knew it wasn't true, and that's damage democracy.
You've had a good go, and we've only got 20 seconds left. No, you're not going to get a minute because we've got the news.
I'm sorry, I've been accused of a number of things.
And last words in the debate to Stephen Joyce. You've got 15 seconds.
Thank you. Simple reality of it is you need to be able to cope with being questioned on your numbers. I made the questions because they're accurate. You've changed your figures.
Kept lying.
No,
all
it's
right,
not.
We've got to leave it there. We did promise it'd be a scrap at the end, didn't we? Stephen Joyce and Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Guyon.
Cheers.